let's talk about the value levers. And so I have a worksheet that I'm going to provide to everyone in the class that you can look at and fill out as part of your homework. And we're going to go through it in detail. But one of the things that we need to discuss are, what is the one lagging metric that is driving the success of your business? In other words, if you could pull any given lever in your business with the least amount of effort to get the most amount of lift, what would that lever be? Now, there are a lot of different potential levers because we have a lot of moving parts in our business. And so it could be hiring more employees to manage products. It could be launching more products, which, it could be the revenue from those new products. It could be the conversion rate of existing products, pricing strategies, administrative costs, landed costs, so cost of goods. So there's a lot of different factors that make up the profitability of your business. So if we want to visualize what that looks like, then we have this chart here. I want to make sure everyone can see this taxonomy of value. Okay, I'm going to zoom in. I purposely have it small here. But what we're looking at is the company value that you have is directly related to basically three different components. One is your revenue. One is your EBITDA, so your profit before taxes and other deductions, and your capabilities. So the capabilities can be your brand recognition, IP, the quality of your team, the processes that you've created, different competitive advantages that you have that others may not can add value to your business. Now, in some instances, revenue matters more than profits. Now, that's funny to say because the majority of businesses on Amazon are bought based on as a multiple of your EBITDA, of your profit. But when you get to a certain size, it's pretty crazy. But once you get to a certain size, let's say 40, 50, $100 million in revenue, there are strategic buyers who will base you more on a multiple of your revenue. As long as you're showing strong growth in the business and a clear path forward for additional growth and a path forward towards profitability. Because some strategic companies, let's say L'Oreal, for example, or the PE firm that owns L'Oreal, if they're owned by a PE firm, because everything's owned by PE firms these days, they say, okay, I've got a competitor to L'Oreal coming up in the space that has 3% market share, which is pretty significant in that space. They've got $120 million or $200 million in revenue. I want to own that 3% as well because that market they're growing the market and L'Oreal might start to shrink. Well, in order to keep the overall company growing, my conglomerate growing, acquisition is a great way to do it. So they start to buy these brands as a percentage of revenue versus profits, for example. And we have I would say a friend and a student who started a skincare brand in 2019, and he sold it just in 2024 for over $100 million to a similar strategic because of that concept, right? So it is very possible that that's a thing. But for the most part, we're going to focus, if you're less than 25 or 50 million, which is probably the majority of people here, we're going to focus on as a percentage of your EBITDA, which means you need to have profit. So let me start to zoom in here a little bit and show you what this looks like. So if I were to try to identify levers for growth in a business, one of the things that we're going to see here is that revenue is only made up of a few different levers. Now, the way that you read this is that everything is formulaic, right? So revenue is the combination or the sum of your revenue from your own website, from wholesale, from Amazon, from Walmart, social e-commerce, or anywhere else, right? So those are the only places that I'm getting revenue. So basically total revenue is revenue from that plus that plus that plus that. That's a formula, right? Now, if I go down this ladder, if you're not yet on Amazon, Walmart, other marketplaces, or on other marketplaces like Shopify, you don't have your own website, you're not doing wholesale, because then, if I go down this ladder, then revenue for Amazon is only made up of two different components. It's going to be revenue from new SKUs plus revenue from existing SKUs. So if this is future facing and I'm setting goals from here, right? Then my revenue from my new SKUs in 2025, plus my revenue from my existing SKUs that I'm expecting to have, will equal my total Amazon revenue, right? So again, it's formulaic, and this is really important that everything stays formulaic as you're filling this out. And I'm going to give you this to fill out yourself. Now, let's say that I want to go to Walmart this year, right? And then that's a lever I want to pull. What you need to be able to do is to identify what is the potential growth of your business by going to Walmart, and how much effort is it going to take to pull that lever. So new capabilities, new education, new supply chains. So you have to understand what are the drivers and causes of setting that goal. And this is part of working backwards. So we're going to be setting these targets later in our class as part of this 2-day training, which is going to be, we're doing annual planning. And so we need to be planning and setting a very specific and measurable goal. And if you've seen any of my content where I discuss anything around goal setting, I always use that term. And it's a term that really stuck with me from all the coaching we've done, which is that every single target in your business needs to be both specific and measurable. So what does that mean? If you write it in this exact formula, from X to Y by when, and you always use that formula, it will always be very specific, because it's from X dollars to Y dollars, or X percent to Y percent. That's very specific. And to by when is very measurable, because now you can create a scorecard and a calendar, and you can start to figure it out from there. Hey, if you're enjoying this content, you're going to love the masterclasses that we host on a regular basis. We've got over 1,000 members in our private community, and over 400 of them are already doing over $1 million. We regularly host masterclasses with hundreds of students, and you can find out more below. Join us. So if we decide, and once you lay out this taxonomy of value, you can start to understand, okay, what did I do right and wrong, and review my numbers so that I can see what will have the biggest lift. And a mistake that you might make is that you would say, you know what, I really want to increase my conversion rates. So let's look out here from existing SKUs. And if we go down this ladder, revenue from existing SKUs is about my average unit price times number of units sold. My units sold is a combination of traffic from outside of Amazon versus inside of Amazon. So we have an entire masterclass coming up about driving outside traffic to Amazon to generate sales. But let's say that it's from traffic from here. Now this is traffic and conversions. At the end of the day, the total number of units sold is the number of people who clicked and landed on your listing, right? So your total impressions on your listing times your conversion rate. How many people actually pulled the trigger? So if 1,000 people visited your website and 111 or 110 purchased your product, that means that you had a conversion rate of 11%. Now, let's say that I say, okay, the biggest lever for me to pull this year is to increase my average conversion rate. Now, there's different reasons to increase your conversion rate, because it can lead to more organic visibility, but that's not necessarily the answer. Because let's say I take this from 11 to 12%, one additional percent here from, and again, we're going to make smaller numbers, but let's say that I had, this is 122,000. Let's say that traffic didn't increase, but only conversion did. So let me pull up a calculator. This is my traffic number, and I've got 1,111,111. Now I'm gonna say that I'm going to make that 12% instead of 11. So that means that I'm going to have an additional 11,000 units sold at an average of $11, which is an additional 1.4 million. Oh, wait. Sorry. It's not. Let me see. 11111 times 0.12 instead of 0.11 is 133,000, which minus 122,000 times $11. So it's an additional 11,000 units sold times $11. That lever, if I increase it, if I choose that lever to go from 11 to 12% on average conversion, is worth $122,000. It's worth an additional 11,000 units at an average of $11. Now, that might sound great, but in the size of this business, where this business is doing $11 million, only moving, or $10 million here, $37 million total, to increase the size, to really move the needle on this revenue number, that lever is not going to be the one that has the most lift in your business. As a matter of fact, that's probably not the lever you want, because you're going to be able to find a different lever that you can put less effort into that will give you a much bigger lift in your business. So the exercise of drawing out all of this and understanding the different working cogs behind your business is simply so that you can understand what is the lever that I can choose, or the levers I can choose to pull this year that will have the biggest lift in my business. So I want to make sure that everyone follows and that we are all on the same page here. So I'm going to stop and answer any questions around the taxonomy of value and how it works. And I have to give credit to my coach, Ojamar Almeida. He is with, he spoke at Camp Ecom last year and led the entire first day with his one of his partners in the executive track, and really taught more towards this. But he's the one that we've learned this from. Everyone's clear as day. So do we input different numbers into the taxonomy to figure out what will bring the biggest change? It's to help you identify. So to your answer, if I change that from 11 to 12, and then I can do the math and I can see what that would result in, then I can start to play with different numbers and see what's going to have the biggest lift. Does that make sense? So by putting your current numbers in there, it's going to help you identify what the new numbers, what your goals should be. Now, the key is that you can usually pull 1 or 2 levers per quarter at maximum, right? If you have a very large org, let's say that you've got a $50 million business and it looks, like this one in some instances, right? And you've got different department heads and different teams running these, then you can have a different goal and lever for each team. And then now you can pull 3, 4, 5 levers a quarter. The reality is most of you have 1 to 10 or 12 or 15 employees, mostly operating under 1 or 2 or 3 departments. You're going to have 1 or 2 levers per quarter that you can pull. And so we're going to go through an exercise of identifying those levers and making sure you don't overextend, because if you try to pull too many levers, you're going to end up pulling no levers. So if you were to decide, that's a great question. If you don't currently sell in Walmart, for example, how would we know what the potential revenue will bring if we decide to get into this new channel? A little bit of market research there, talking to other sellers who are already doing it to ask them what percentage of sales they make from Walmart, what the typical traffic and conversions are on their different markets versus Amazon, would give you some idea. Now you have a lift, you have to work backwards. So you have to understand what is it going to require for me to do this? So one of the exercises we're going to go through when we set these goals is to decide or write down specifically what are the drivers and causes of pulling that lever. So what are the requirements? What are the resources, people, money, time, capabilities, education? All of those things need to be drawn out here. And it might even be new supply chain. It's going to be opening up new warehouses. It might be partnering with warehouses. It might be, getting the account set up, placing new orders, redoing packaging. There's a lot of requirements for pulling the Walmart lever when you're not currently selling on Walmart and you're mostly FBA, right? So we need to lay those all out. We need to understand, what is that lift? What are the resources we're investing into that versus the reward? And then that way you can start to lay it out. Yeah, and Nikki, we did this considering going into Mexico, and we asked another seller. At the end of the day, we didn't pull that trigger because it didn't appear to be as big of an impact as we had hoped. At the end, what's great is you went through that exercise and then you identified that. But what lever did you pull instead? And make sure you actually execute on that is the goal of today. So we're going to try to get through a review process with you and your teams. If it's just you, you're going to be brutally honest about where you're at, and we'll get to that.